Well, there you go. January 8th, Thursday, and we're what? 5 minutes late? What is going on? Again, if you could just help us out with a little bit of that CBC budget, we'd be much appreciated. $1.55 billion. They're not using it for much. I'm Jim Check with Now Media. With me, Ian Burns. Almost 100,000 views in the last couple of days, last 48 hours. The channel's starting to pick up, so that's good. People sharing this, liking this, subscribing, get it out there, more people. Because what happened today shows that it works, and we'll get into that. Some of the headlines for today, though. Where are we going here? The crippling of democracy in Canada. Adrian Dix says no linkage between BC projects and an oil pipeline. U.S. economy booming. Carney actively recruiting MPs to cross. CBC ramps up the fear machine. Global on the brink. Canada must pick a path as energy becomes tantamount. Ford now screams for oil. BC still a boo bird. China no longer a threat. That's a good question there. And Gary taking over for Joe Lee there. Oh, Gary. And pressure works. That's what I say. Pressure works. Freeland quits. And it is the pressure. And it wasn't the government-funded media or the state broadcaster that do. They were running protection. But the pressure by everybody works. Are more liberals to come and quit? Are they going to? There's talk that more are going to quit. And conflicts of interest everywhere for Carney. Green scheme rating of the taxpayer is over everywhere except, you can take a guess, Mark Miller. Mark Miller. And the food pyramid is upside down. David Eby, another one. We just have to put their name there, and then that's it.
Yeah, it's just funny.
Just
Their
put their
names
name
just
there.
crack me up.
Just their name, David Eby.
Mark Miller. It's like,
And the U.S. economy booming. Not so much here. And U.S. lays out plan for Venezuela, Greenland, and what it all means. What's going on with Greenland? All that and a lot more on the Really Big Show. We do thank you for liking, subscribing. Subscribers shooting way up there in the last few days as well. And if you can like, share, it's the biggest show, best undiscovered show on the internet. People are telling us that. And there you go. And we got some comments for you. We're going to kind of share some of the comments. And then we got one here. Thank you for both honest reporting, watching you from Montreal. Thank you for Montreal. There you go. Overrun by liberals there. So yeah, so on an island out there probably. And I agree with you, Jim. One of the best shows on social media. Thank you. We agree with you as well. Best undiscovered show on the internet right now. And if you could help us like, share, and subscribe, comment, tell us where you're from. And if you like what we do, you can also contribute. You guys are so refreshing from the state-paid propagandists, especially from the CBC. Keep up the great work. And somebody said, keep it up, boys. 30K subscribers on the list here. And of course, there's always a hater in there that says, this YouTube site comes from the Americas trying to destroy our country. Well, I don't know about that.
Space. Full stop.
I don't know about that. We're not from the Americas. We're from the North Americas, I guess. North America. Canada, part of North America. But yeah. If we were from the Americas, you could see us on Facebook.
Yeah, might have more than 30,000 subscribers then.
We had 200,000, so if we were from Americas, we would still have our Facebook and be able to inform our people. But we're not, so as much as you might think. But the headline there, the crippling of democracy in Canada. I mean, that's what's been going on for the past 10 years. And here's another one. This is the Nunavut MP says she won't cross the floor to join the Liberals at this point, and that's NDP MP Lori Idlout says she's been asked to consider, and this is after the Carney Liberals have denied that they even went after the Scott Anderson here in Vernon. They say they're not doing any of that stuff. Remember CBC said that the other day too? Just like, oh, why would he go after that ostrich supporter? You know?
He's pro-ostrich.
Pro-ostrich. We don't want any pro-ostrich people. And now it turns out, looks like they're still looking. Still looking. So what is the Go ahead.
This is quite worrying, though, I should say, because obviously there has to be some kind of quid pro quo, doesn't there? They don't usually tend to do this kind of thing out of nowhere or for nothing. Place like Nunavut, obviously this woman is MP for a huge stretch of land that's always in need of more cash, you have to immediately ask that question, like, what is the offer? How much is it going to cost us for the Liberal Party to obtain a majority? How much are we, the taxpayer, going to have to pay for that?
And it's an affront to democracy. It's absolutely an affront to democracy. Michael Ma, 27,000 votes. He decides for 27,000 votes. And here it is again, the Liberals are doing it. What's the point of an election? Why not just have parties vie for other people and just never have an election? Because if the voter doesn't matter, what does it matter? Just go around and see if you can convince or buy votes, buy candidates to get your majority. This is a serious affront to democracy, and it's blatantly open now. It's not even like, when Mark Carney spoke on CBC there with Rosemary Barton, he said, "Oh no, we're not actively pursuing anybody. They're coming to us. They're attracted to us." I think that was with the hand motions. They're attracted to what we're doing. That's clearly not the case. Again, saying one thing, another thing happening. Now we have an NDP candidate and a Conservative candidate say they were approached and tried to be talked into it. And Scott Anderson saying, "No way in hell." And then she's saying, well, but it's an absolute affront. What's the purpose of votes? So the Liberal Party does not care about your vote. And then the other thing, if you want a healthy democracy, you have to have healthy media. Do we have a healthy media landscape in Canada? Bill C-18 has crippled and corrupted media, and we're going to show you some of that later. So that's the watchdogs. That's the watchdogs for Canada, the media. And is CBC acting in the best interests of Canadians right now? They should be losing their minds with what was happening with Chrystia Freeland. It's only because of independent media that Chrystia Freeland left and the uproar on X and other places. It surely wasn't because of CBC, who was making excuses for her all day long.
And CTV. I mean, they were all doing it. They were doing it in such a low grade fashion as well, where they were saying a source has told us that not even on the record stuff.
So the media is actually running cover for the Liberals. And then the other thing is just like the economy has been driven into despair over the past 10 years, and that's policy. We talked about that, and that's weak leadership. But it also weakens the public, because then you're at the begging bowl. You're asking for handouts because you can't look after yourself, which makes it even easier for the government to manipulate. And then how many scandals have they not turned over the documents? How many things are covered up? We talk about it over and over again, and we're going to talk about some more of it here today. How many scandals? They will not be held accountable, and they will not do interviews. They will not do interviews. They will not even answer questions. So how do you have a free and fair democracy if the elections mean nothing and they won't be held accountable and they've crippled this economy so that everybody's at the begging bowl? How do you do that? And there's conflicts of interest everywhere and they won't answer any questions. How is Canada a healthy democracy at this point?
It's very difficult, isn't it, to try and make that argument, frankly. Democracy depends on a lot of things that aren't written down. That's another thing, isn't it? I mean, this is a very complex subject that we don't have time to discuss, but a lot of it's kind of just based on culture. It's based on things that are quite they're difficult to define. And obviously, it's a kind of whole society problem, isn't it? The media is one aspect of it, but I don't think there are many people that would disagree with us, though, that Canadian democracy everywhere really is beleaguered now and much diminished. That is, after all, one of the Liberals' primary points, that democracy is imperiled and it needs to be strengthened, fortified, as the Democrats said.
Well, I mean, look at all the bills that the Liberals are trying to introduce. Instead of focusing on the economy, what are the bills they're trying to introduce? C2 and the other ones, the Online Streaming Act, Online News Act, everything that squashes freedom of speech. And I've done tons of interviews with John Carpe, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, Lisa Bildy. It seems like they continue to compress freedom of expression here in Canada. And they talk about X, the #1 news platform in the world. I think it's about 170 countries now. They say it's a sea of misinformation, disinformation. Yet, where does Chrystia Freeland resign? Right there on X, right? In the sea of misinformation and disinformation. It's absolutely comical. If a government refuses to be held accountable, it is the threat to democracy. How many times has Mark Carney sat down with independent media outlets or even the government broadcaster, like 30 minutes he provided, I think, 30 minutes to 2 outlets, in a year. And a lot of his other stuff is 15 minutes at the podium. And then if you look at it in comparison to Trump and his people, they provide themselves access to themselves for hours at a time for interviews, and then all of them go out there and do interviews and let the American people know what's going on. That is not the case here in Canada.
And they also, I mean, say what you want about it. I mean, it is quite foolish, I think. It's quite a ridiculous piece of theater. But the Americans also put out spokespeople, that Caroline Levitt woman. Like they put her out all the time. Like there's so much more interaction with the media.
Every day, Caroline Levitt stands up at the podium and takes questions. None of that happens here in Canada. None of that. And that's
it's so much more mysterious and dark and shadowy, isn't it, in Canada? And we've pointed this out so many times, but it's worth saying it again, really, which is the Canadian political elite is in no position to look down on the Americans when it comes to media access to politicians and the scrutiny that politicians are put under by the media. We're not in a position to judge, frankly, any other democracy, as far as I'm aware.
We will have none of it. And just like the MP there from none of it, we will have none of it. And we're going to start calling them out. We're going to ask for interviews. We have Andrea's arranged, the producer of the show. She's arranged for Stephen Bonk to be on the show tomorrow. So, well, not on the show, but he'll be doing an interview tomorrow. He put out that video that we used the other day. So, the Conservatives at least answer the emails and answer requests for interview.
Some of them do.
Yeah, that's true. And that's so Chris d'Entremont. How do you say that again? I'm like terrible. D'Entremont and Michael Maw have both crossed over to the Liberals. And like he watched David Cochrane there basically cheerlead people walking over. That is supposed to be Canada's watchdog. We pay $1.55 billion to Canada's watchdog. And the only thing they're doing is it's basically the lapdog of the Liberal Party. Not watchdog, lapdog. And then
we're going to talk about it later, aren't we? We're going to talk about the Chrystia Freeland thing later, I assume.
Well,
I think we'll see if we've got time, but I really think that we should read the entire article put out by CTV. Talk about lapdogs.
And then CBC ramping up the fear machine here. They got with Trump's Venezuela move and Greenland threats. And they've been doing this. They're talking about the Americans are going to invade Canada. Like, come on. Come on.
What's so good about this is it's a guy who's got all kinds of, it's like in North Korea, he would have like 500 medals on his breast. The journalist that wrote this, he's got like this long list of experience, and it's an analysis piece. And it's, as you can see by my giggles, it's quite a ridiculous article.
Yeah, Idaho man there saying not so long ago, reporter instantly insulted if they took their money from the state. CBC just drinking at the trough. Their face is just buried in the trough. They got an extra, in the election, $150 million promised by the Carney Liberals. And the rest of the legacy media get almost half their salaries paid by none other than the government.
And the government, or the Liberal Party, which controls the government, literally mocks them.
Yeah,
on the record. Yeah. Mocks them, and they still do nothing about it, say nothing about it. There's no outrage. They're just going along to get along.
Yeah, and the CBC released that analysis you just talked about that, and it's just ridiculous, the fear machine that they ramp up there, and they get this segment of the population here to just froth at the mouth with hate, and not realizing that every morning they wake up under the safety and umbrella of the United States military, because it surely hell isn't the Canadian military that they're waking up under the safe umbrella of.
And there's no other umbrella for sale. There's no other umbrella in the market, is there? That's the other thing to mention. Like we're kind of trapped, whether we like it or not. We need a benefactor because we couldn't possibly defend ourselves against a serious opponent. We've talked about it. Even a country like Israel, which is like a quarter of the size, or less than a quarter of the size of Canada in terms of population. Israel could conquer Canada in probably 12 hours. That's how pathetic this country is in terms of military capacity. Countries like Ukraine as well. Like, it's been neglected for so long that we can no longer be naive about it. We have to start being realistic, I think.
There's really three big national outlets in Canada, and CTV has got the biggest voice, and CBC has the biggest pot of money. CBC, which is the most ineffective cost per viewer, the CBC is the only thing skyrocketing in Canada. But CTV has the biggest voice, and then there's Global, which had a big voice, but they've been crippled. Let's pull up that chart of look at where Chorus Entertainment, which is Global here, this stock. What again happened in around 2015?
Yeah, I was gonna
Any
say
any
it's another one of
thoughts?
those charts.
Any thoughts what happened around 2015 when they talk about how they're going to help media? Even Justin Trudeau said how he was going to help media. Does this look like help? This is the stock chart of Global. It's trading at 3 cents right now. 3 cents. 3 cents. And it has, like, I think it's close to $1 billion worth of debt. And here I'm just going to read you a couple of things that because they're going to do their financial transaction here to try and recapitalize this company here. If the company fails to implement the recapitalization transaction, it will need to pursue alternative restructuring strategies, in which case there is unlikely to be any kind of recovery for shareholders, of course. What does that mean? Bankrupt. Done. Finished. Kaput. I mean, they lay off journalists all the time. I mean, there's really no office here in Kelowna. I mean, there's no studio here anymore. And but the executive team was still taking fat bonuses. Like, good for them. Bully for them. Hey?
Well, and they're still getting Carney interviews, the rarest
Yeah.
thing in Canadian
Yeah.
politics
They
and media. They're still getting that.
so they didn't give it to Vasi Kapelis of CTV, the only one that's probably the one of the better ones out there. Vasi Kapelis didn't get an interview, but they gave it to two of the ones that are right at the begging bowl. And so this transaction, they're going to collapse this thing down to for every 500 shares you get one, and basically you're going to get pennies on the dollar for the debt that's outstanding. I don't know who's going to approve it. They say if you don't approve it after, they're basically saying without recapitalization or an event is not completed on the terms and timeline, the company will need to pursue alternative restructuring strategies. Yeah, file for bankruptcy. There you
Does
go.
good news ever come out of Chorus? It's just always all their press releases are just bleak, aren't they? And all their results, financial
Well,
results.
you can go pull their financial statements and you can go look that the executive seems to still do fine. They seem to be able to find
They're
some
all well,
cash.
they're the priority of any company, aren't they?
They
Got to
just
look
go,
after your big boys.
you just go dig around in the back there and then just like slowly find some cash and make sure you raid what's left of the drawer. And this company has basically been the Walking Dead for a while. Basically, the Walking Dead. And who got the interview? The crippled and corrupted media in Canada. The crippled and corrupted media. That's the crippling of democracy. That's the watchdogs. No wonder, right? If you want, I mean, they're going to be begging for the government for more money as well. It's not a business model. That is not a healthy business model to have the media reliant on government, especially not even the government, but one party. They're reliant on one party for their funding. So who do they want to keep in power? We'll see it when we talk about Freeland here. And then, there's lots of talk about how, like there's, like, the RBC, one of the top guys there saying, oh, there's some good talk from Bay Street here saying that, things, could be good if we get that pipeline. But I mean, this is James Thorne, another economist out there. Canadians' financial and political class celebrating a supposed turning point, but let's damage our relationship with the U.S. and hitch our wagon to the EU and call that a growth plan. I mean, you and I have talked about that how many times. Why would you hitch your wagon? There's the rising star. We know where it is. And then you're going to actually go to the places that, again, self-inflict on themselves. The European Union have self-inflicted the climate agenda on themselves and immigration policies similar to what's happening here. And they self-inflicted that. We talked about that yesterday. Look what we've done to our economy in 10 years of what Ian called yesterday weak leadership. Weak leadership that has wasted a decade on identity politics and virtue signaling.
Yeah. Well, I would say as well, you say the US is the rising star. I think it's even more obvious than rising star. The United States is the star. It's the sun, isn't it, really? It's our star. We're like Mercury next to the star here. The European Union is certainly a fading star, isn't it? If it was ever a star at all, stagnating. And China probably will be classed as more of a rising star, or India. To an extent, people even say Russia sometimes. But yeah, it's like it's not even that we're taking a gamble. It's not like, oh, let's go with this rising star here. It's like, no, let's just go with the sun that's always been there. And we're Mercury. So let's just orbit this thing, shall we?
Big shout out to Charles there. Thank you for the contribution. We appreciate it as
Charles
well.
MacDonald?
We appreciate all the contributions to keep free and independent media alive here in Canada, because it is the only watchdog left here in Canada, and we need more voices. It is in the United States too. It's the independent media that are breaking stories. If you look at what Nick Shirley broke, I mean, we have the biggest fall from grace there in the United States. We'll talk about it later in the show. That was independent media. Independent media is the future, and independent media 2026. It'll be the big year for the breakout for independent media because the trust is here.
Yeah. I
And
would also say, sorry, just a quick addition to what I was saying about America there. We also should, because we didn't have time to talk about it the other day when they seized that. Well, they seized two ships, didn't they? But they seized a Russian oil tanker. How many times have we said now that, we take it for granted that we can just sail merchant vessels over the oceans and they'll be fine and safe and they'll reach their destination. The Americans have just confirmed exactly what people like you and me have been warning about. That depends on the United States goodwill, pretty much. And if we have this idea of we'll just choose Europe, we'll choose Europe and Asia over America, and the Americans can go and bugger off somewhere. I mean, all the Americans have to do, literally just an executive order. The commander in chief can just say the United States Navy will no longer protect Canadian merchandise as it goes across the oceans. Then that plan's dead. Then what do we do? Some Somali pirates, or indeed the Russians, will just seize it. Then what do we do? We're going to send the Coast Guard out there.
let's remember the Coast Guard has no weapons and does not intend to get weapons, and they can't even issue a fishing ticket. Like they can't even issue tickets; they have to take somebody from fisheries there. So you can forget about our Coast Guard doing much.
I think they have megaphones, though, don't they? So we could probably shout at the Russians as they steal the oil tanker.
We could probably put
Don't
Gary
do
on the
that, buddy.
Gary on the ship and say, "Give us your guns." Gary's collecting guns. He's got cash for you. Somebody said that we should do merchandise. I agree. We should do hats. We should do some hats, right? The really big show or now media. Love it.
That'd be good.
Doug
Or
Ford.
ties.
Ties. Look at that. Two guys with ties. Hey, we started the show with ball caps, and you weren't even on the screen. So, budget gets better every day.
Didn't have a camera.
Didn't even have a camera. And we got new mics. Look at that, eh? We don't have $1.55 billion yet, though. Take it away from those guys. They're not doing anything with it. Doug Ford. Now he wants pipelines. Doug Ford. We got a little clip from Doug here. Let's listen in to Doug. What is it then? No clip? Oh, there you go. Doug Ford. Canada can't afford to wait. We need more pipelines in every direction. Okay, Doug, where were you during the election? One guy was going to build pipelines. The other guy, not so much.
It's like he's backed a horse, and then the race has been run. His horse has won the race, and now he's having gambler's remorse, isn't he? Backer's remorse. Oh, but he's not even that self-aware. He's still all in on Carney, but he's not self-aware about the fact that the guy that he refused to back and who he kind of like took digs at, Pierre Poilievre, did an interview yesterday with Juno, I believe it was, and he was talking about no, we don't just need an oil pipeline to Kitimat or Prince Rupert or whatever. We need two, and he's like, we need this, we need this. He's like listing all the things that we need. It's like sounds a lot like Doug Ford actually when you hear him speak. Yet again, that strange decision that Doug Ford made to stab Poilievre in the back, or at least to have this kind of it was like an argument or something, wasn't it? It was like a lover's tiff that they had, and it played out into the political realm. But yeah, I mean, you'd like to think he has perhaps considered that decision, whether it was a good one after all.
Shout out to Heidi there. Thank you for the contribution, keeping free and independent media moving along in Canada. Because like I said, it is working, and we're going to talk about that as we get to the Freeland thing here. But
thank you, Heidi.
The boo birds still that block the BC coastline, and we got a little clip here. This time we do have a clip. It's from our friend Adrian Dix, former health minister in BC, that wouldn't take an interview. We've reached out to him. How many times have we asked Adrian Dix for an interview? And how many times did we get? We might got to stay.
That's one of the old wounds. That's a scar now, isn't it? It's healed over into a scar. I can't remember how many times I asked him. I had to call up into the press conference and asked him, got through, did ask him a couple of questions. That was during the COVID time. And ever since, I've been unable to ask a question at BC press conferences. So I don't think he liked it.
Let's play this clip here from with Fassi here and Adrian Dix.
Conversation thanks to the MOU that was signed. And
right.
The position seems to be almost zero sum from BC, right? Like it's either we get our LNG projects, which we believe have greater value, or this pipeline goes ahead. And I'm not sure that's actually realistic, hence why I push on the issue of grandstanding.
Not zero sum at all. There's no linkage. It's the conflation of real projects like LNG Canada 2, which is actually seeing a final investment decision. We know who the investors are. We know who the joint venture partners are. And we just built LNG 1, which is the largest private sector investment in Canada. You can't compare that to projects that don't exist. They're essentially political projects that drive a political message. So we're not linking them at all. We're saying that Canada needs to get things built now, and BC is going to lead the way because we've got the projects to do it. That's what we're saying. And with respect to zero sum, we've been, I think, open, and people have criticized a bit for this, to, for example, optimization projects. We've been open to that, which actually directly involve British Columbia Hydro, and the people of BC. So when we talk about
how good was that?
They just keep changing their tune. This is like they are stopping prosperity. And you talked about it yesterday. And if anybody hasn't watched yesterday's show, go back and watch that because Ian nailed it and talked about 10 years of weak leadership, and that's weak leadership from the NDP and the Liberals.
Well, it's flip-flopping as well, isn't it?
Just absolute weak leadership. 10 years. And Mark Carney is not excused from it because he was the economic advisor, supposedly because Justin Trudeau said it. He doesn't care about the economy. He also said the budget balances itself. Apparently it doesn't. Freeland doesn't know how to balance a budget. But apparently she's one of the biggest financial wizards, and she's going to go fix Ukraine because she's such a wizard.
Yeah, and apparently it's just going to be a wartime leader for them, a wartime advisor. But yeah, I mean, as for Dix, I just want to highlight what he's saying there. He's trying to use terms that maybe some people might not be familiar with. I imagine most people are familiar though, but he's trying to use language, isn't he? That's trendy language where he's talking about zero sum and how certain things are being conflated and linkage and things like that. The usual sort of pretentiousness that we get from Adrian Dix. But what he's trying to say there is the BC government or the BC NDP is not connecting in any way their projects or what they see as their projects, including LNG, with this oil pipeline. That is clearly, obviously, categorically untrue. That's false. David Eby almost daily for months linked the two. And he's not only that, but he introduced threats. And he said, if they get this pipeline, the First Nations will kill our project here, including the LNG project. Is that not linking? Is that not zero sum? And I feel like, obviously, Vasi Kapelos, so I've got mixed feelings about her because she is undoubtedly the best major journalist in Canada. I don't think there's any, like TV journalist. Don't think that she has a rival at all, frankly. She's the only one that would have asked a question like that in the first place. But then she asks it and then she kind of lets him get away with murder. You know, it's maybe she's like a little bit too polite or something. I don't know what it is with Vasi, but that was an unacceptable answer from Mr. Dix, and it was obviously untrue. And I feel like she should have squashed him for that.
Yeah, somebody said, why don't we get, I think Idaho Man said, why don't we get Pierre? I have interviewed Pierre twice in the past, but it's been like a ghost town for a while. But we do have Stephen Bonk, the MP, the Conservative MP, tomorrow. He did that Brookfield video, so we're going to have him, I think it's at 11:30 tomorrow. I've actually reached out to Scott Anderson. He said he wants to wait till Mark Carney responds, but he did respond to me, so that's good.
We've tried to get Pierre, haven't we? Just I think we just gave up in the end. We should probably keep trying. I mean, we don't know for sure whether or not he's even ever been told, because it all has to go through a middleman. And when you've interviewed him, he's been quite receptive and sort of. We've interviewed him lots of times. You've interviewed him twice. Kent interviewed him a couple of times, didn't he? And somebody else did.
Well, used to be on.
He used to come to the Okanagan quite a lot, didn't he?
Sebastian used to phone me. He was his guy. He used to phone me at night, and we'd talk and set up the interviews and stuff like that. But now nothing, right? Just ghost. Anyway, we'll see if we're going to push again. We'll push hard again. We're just going to push on. We're going to put out receipts too, because we're done with just asking nicely. So we're done with playing nice. But Mark Carney was off there in France, there in Paris, there, and he was basically, I guess, the the third wheel there, as Starmer and Macron signed the big agreement, and Mark Carney off in the shadows there again, not invited to the table to actually do anything. So now he's off to China. Remember that in his election there, he was saying he was asked, China is the biggest threat. That was at the leadership debate. He said China is the biggest threat to Canada. But let's listen to this clip here. This is from CTV as well.
This will mark the first visit to China by a Canadian Prime Minister since 2017. Joining me now with more is Charles Burton, former Canadian diplomat in Beijing and senior fellow at Synopsis. Charles, thanks for being here.
Good to speak with you.
So we get into this too. This relationship is complicated, especially over the last several years, but Canada clearly continues, and Mark Carney in particular needs to look elsewhere with what's happening with the U.S. What do you think, and what are the expectations should be for this trip to China?
Well, my expectations are not very great. I think in terms of the U.S. is probably not happy that Canada declared last year that our relationship with China is a strategic partnership. I mean, who are China's other strategic partners? Russia, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, are they also our strategic partners? It's, it doesn't sound good in Washington. In terms of the accomplishments of the mission, you mentioned trade. China's economy is not doing well. So the idea that China would take imports to substitute for their own production, probably not happening. Energy, we hope to sell more liquefied natural gas and oil to China. We just have to get it to Tidewater. Agriculture, China would reduce the tariffs on our canola seeds if we allow China to sell electric vehicles in Canada. But that, for Canada would be devastating to our auto industry because the Chinese EVs are so heavily subsidized and also present a very serious security risk because they're essentially spy machines on wheels. So it would be worse than Huawei 5G, say. And international security, I really don't think we can get China to agree that they won't engage in the extensive espionage they do in Canada, or their influence operations, or their harassment of people in our country. I mean, they already claim they never do that. So I don't really know what kind of progress we could make in security, not to speak of cyber.
That's good. Mark Carney said this: China represents a new partnership for growth. He said that yesterday, confirmed the January 13th trip. And it's the first conference of his kind since Carney called China our worst security threat, and a federal inquiry like in Communist Party meddling in Canadian elections to a national level. They had that meeting earlier, and I think that was in Korea, though, wasn't it? When he met with the Chinese President Xi, and then said that he said they would have a meeting, a follow-up meeting after that. So that was a meeting to have a meeting. So, and here's the meeting that was following up that. He says, we're forging new partnerships around the world to transform our economy from one that has been reliant on a single partner to one that is stronger and more resilient to global shocks. And we're creating new partnerships. But the Prime Minister last April called China the biggest threat to Canadian security. He made that remark in the election debate. We just said that. But it's also, China has also said that it is the #1 partner to Russia, and said that's an unconditional partnership with Russia. And more, it's Russia and supporting the unjustified illegal invasion of Ukraine. But like yesterday, Mark Carney said that Ukraine is like the biggest partner to Canada. So now you have partners that are like on both sides of that conflict, right? China and Russia, like heavily linked to each other. And then also Canadian security intelligence records show that when under Trudeau, his cabinet and political aides were warned 163, get that, 163 separate times of foreign interference over a 6-year period. The intelligence service in February 21st, 2023 memo told Trudeau that Chinese agents posed an existential threat to Canadian democracy. Ready for this? No action was taken. No action was taken, and they were running
Well,
police.
Trudeau
They
did
were
take
running
action. He
police.
started to say that the Conservatives were compromised by
Yeah,
Indian influence.
no action was taken. No action was
China,
taken.
though,
Yeah.
China's like, you know, we can't pretend that they don't exist, can we? And we can't destroy relations with them like Trudeau did, but still have them as the #2 trading partner. Like, that
Yeah.
didn't make any sense, really, did it? It was a bit illogical. It's just about, it's just, you know, you got to really walk a very fine line, haven't you, with China? And you just got to somehow have a relationship with China that benefits you, benefits your country. That's not easy to do, really, is it? And I don't know. Do you think Carney's got the wherewithal to figure this one out? This is like a massive conundrum that barely any country in the world has been able to figure out. Even America hasn't figured it out.
So
Nobody can figure it out.
I
So,
rec-
I mean, believing that Carney's going to figure it out maybe is a little bit naive.
I recognize that Canada needs to probably find some alternative places for its oil, and we should have done that a long time ago. And China may be one of them, Japan, all those kinds of things. My bigger problem is Mark Carney, with his still has most of his wealth tied up in Brookfield. Brookfield has deep ties to Chinese land, loans, green deals. Brookfield had made major investments in China. You can put up the Brookfield slide there. Major investments, and then some of them went south when the real estate thing went south, and they ended up taking a large loan from China. And Mark Carney is part of that. Mark Carney is you know, he's been there when he wasn't the prime minister. He's been to China many times and working deals with many of the higher ups in the Chinese government. So with still having all the ties to Brookfield, all his wealth there, I mean, that conflict becomes front and center, but it's not talked about from the mainstream media here. That, you know, like, who is he making these decisions for? Like, there's definitely a conflict or a perceived conflict. And he should be selling all his shares, because I mean, it's tough for him to be making deals when he could be enriching himself and putting Canada at risk.
And there's also, just to go back to hammer my boring old point that I like to bring up a lot of the time. Yeah, we can sell oil to China, we can sell canola to China, all sorts of goodies like that. But we have to remember that we sell things to China only so long as the Americans approve, basically. If they disapprove and somebody like Trump is president, they won't let our ships go there, basically. I mean, it's that simple. So we shouldn't become completely reliant on China, or indeed any country on the other side of the Atlantic or Pacific Oceans, because we don't have the ability to protect our ships. And that America does that. If America doesn't like it, buy ships.
And then this is from BBC. Influential China church reports arrests as crackdown on Christians intensifies. So China, again, the BC ferry thing, Mark Carney still has an answer to that. We use Canada infrastructure money, $1 billion, I think it was $1.1 billion was given to the Chinese, or given to BC to do that deal for the Chinese ferries. And then, you know, David Eby said that it was, you know, price was one of the considerations. Like, how do we compete? They have no industrial carbon tax. They have human rights violations all over the place for cheap labor. They use inferior steel and aluminum. We see that with what they did on the Patello Bridge here in BC. And we're supposed to compete with that? How? And we're using Canadian dollars to fund China, like our infrastructure bank money. And again, in that infrastructure bank, there's ties to Carney, because there's those people that worked with Carney before, and also with McKinsey & Co. I mean, the web that's been weaved there, I mean, that's where that moose on the loose guy has got. He's got strings coming out of everywhere. I mean, you got to get a new ball of yarn every day.
Don't forget that we give them money as well, don't we? For like gender,
Oh,
well,
all right,
I can't remember what it was now.
I can't remember how many
Gender
millions.
equal elections or something.
Was
Something
it a couple
ridiculous.
and human rights things? If you were telling me,
Yeah,
I think it was close to $100 million that we gave to China, the second largest economy in the world. And if we looked at the size of our economy, where's all this money coming from for Canada? Anyway.
It comes out of your pocket one way or another, either in the form of taxes or inflation.
And then here's the guy in charge of the foreign agents. That's Gary. You know, you got to have a lot of confidence when Gary steps up to the microphone, right? According to this,
Oh, just look at him. He instills confidence. That's the kind of face. That's the kind of man that you'd go into battle and die for. isn't it? Just
How
out of pure respect.
how he still has a cabinet position is again just that's reflects on Mark Carney's leadership after that leaked call there with his tenant there on the gun buyback program. But there are estimated 2,500 undeclared foreign agents that operate in Canada. And they just watered that down. The fines are now as low as $50, and then they won't disclose who gets fined. Wow, that's tough going, eh? So the guys at Tim Hortons that are using Canada's immigration department as HR department don't have to worry about fines or anything, or even being, like outed for it, because Gary's got their back.
And we know the kind of we know what that means now, don't we? When Gary's got your back, he has got your back. He'll come and bail you out if you're arrested. Personally, bail
That's
you
what he
out.
said. That's what he
He's
said.
promised that on the record.
And then Frank Caputo put, what do 8 Big Macs and a proposed fine in the foreign agent registry have in common? Both can be had for $50. There you go.
I don't know about that, Frank. Can you get 8 Big Macs for $50 these days? Pretty expensive. Last time I indulged.
Well, just to kind of keep it there on Gary. So far in the gun buyback program, looks like they got some progress here now, because it was zero. They spent $50 million and they got 0 guns. And that's $750 million that's been set aside for this gun buyback program, while our ports are a leaky vessel at best, like a spaghetti strainer. The federal government has revealed the 6-week buyback trial run last autumn resulted in the collection of 25 banned firearms. The pilot in Nova Scotia was beset by problems. Wow. Including when a recording of a man responsible for implementing Gary, that's Gary, was released in September. In the recording, the minister said the police don't have the resources to enforce the program. Poor Gary.
That's when he said he'd bail someone out if they were arrested for having illegal firearms. He also said the worst thing of all, I think, in that was that he said, we're just doing this for Quebec, because otherwise we wouldn't win the election as the Liberal Party.
And again, that goes back to our top story there, the crippling of democracy in Canada. Right there. We're just doing it for votes. We're Josh.
Well, talk about crippling of democracy or crippling or lowering of standards. This guy's still employed. His name is freely uttered by the press. The Canadian press, the only real agency in Canada that every outlet relies on. Every outlet publishes their content. All the major outlets publish their stories verbatim with the Canadian press byline. Their story on this doesn't even mention that Ananda Sangri was caught on a recording saying the things that he said, that it was a stupid policy, that he didn't believe in it, he would do it different if he could start again, that it's only there for Quebec, and also that he would go and bail someone out if they were arrested. Well, he also said, the police aren't going to get you, I'll make sure of it, or something. It's like, but the Canadian press, like I said, that article is everywhere. Every news outlet that you've ever heard of in Canada pretty much will have published that article. They don't even mention that.
And one of our colleagues that used to work here now works for Canadian Press, Dane. Remember Dane?
Is Dane at the CP now, is he? I thought he was Globe and Mail.
Now he's at the Canadian Press. I just saw it.
Well, the Globe and Mail has like a big chunk of CP. I think it might be run out of their office as well. So, but anyway, I mean, Dane's a top lad. Let's emphasize that. But the Canadian Press is. They are sometimes just so appalling, especially, I mean, something that we know very well, Bill C-18, Online News Act. They're reporting on that. That's what made me finally crack and send that email to the editor, which was obviously ignored, even though I pointed out that his reporter had breached basically every single one of their codes of ethics.
It was scathing. It was a scathing
editorial standards.
Zero response. And I asked for an interview, and I got 0 response as well. I said I'd like to interview you on 0, nothing. So that's what they think of freedom of the press right there. And, well, it turns out a Ukrainian government employee, get this, I like how the way you wrote that, Ukrainian government employee said she's going to resign as a Canadian MP. There you go. So Ukrainian government advisor, Chrystia Freeland, is now she will resign on Friday. That's tomorrow, after intense public pressure. Again, this is where your voice matters. Your voice absolutely matters, because this is independent media that did it. There was that story by Terry Newman there in the National Post, Brian Lilly's, ourselves, and other independent journalists, Sam Cooper's and that stuff that put this pressure on. And then just the outcry from the people on X and different places. Otherwise, she would still be there because CBC running cover for her, CTV running cover, and they're just saying, oh, well, you know, the Liberals might need some votes. You can go watch those clips. You had something you wanted to say here earlier, though?
About Freeland. I mean, I was just going to talk about the write-ups of this and how abysmal they've been, but I don't think I even need to go into it really. If anyone out there still, and I assume you do, I would advise that you still do this, that you still read the main outlets. It's very good to, I think it's very good to see what the establishment perspective is on any issue. But the reporting on this has just been abysmal, and it's it's all been credited to just like the conservatives. They're just playing silly buggers again. It's just like, oh God, these Tories going on about this again. I mean, it's to me, this is an absolutely disgraceful scandal. This is the biggest scandal so far, I would say, in the Carney's time as Prime Minister. I mean, there are some rivals, but I think this is the biggest one. The fact that they give the impression that they wanted to try and get away with it. That's almost the worst thing, isn't it? They wanted to stick it out in the sly and just see what happens. You know, run it up a flagpole and see who salutes it, as the apartment would have it. And it's just nobody saluted it, did they? There was shock and horror. And then they said, oh, okay, well, we tried, so I'll just resign. That's the impression that one inevitably has, I think, a sort of observant Canadian citizen would have of this. That's appalling that Mark Carney at least connived in that. I mean, the alternative, if it wasn't that, if it wasn't some sly attempt to get away with it, the alternative is that they're just so disorganized, so incompetent and clueless that this just happened, and then they were left, they were stunned when Zelensky sent out that tweet. That's in some ways that's even worse, isn't it? That they're so clueless about things like this. But I mean, either way, this
This
is not a joyful time
this
for Canada, really.
this again demonstrates the weakness of Mark Carney, though. How many MPs have done stuff that should have got fired for, and would have gotten fired for normally? Freeland, I mean, there's still some ethics violations here. Like she's supposed to have a cooling off period, so that still needs to come out. And there should be an investigation into how much influence did she have on the $36 billion that's going over to Ukraine with no oversight? How much influence did she have, and how much of that is she going to control the spending of when they say she's taking an unpaid job? I mean, how gullible are we, right? How gullible are we?
Yeah.
And
Also, all this chat about cooling off periods and the ethics commissioner says this, the ethics guidelines say that. Who do you think it controls ultimately these rules and these individuals? It's people like Chrystia Freeland. It's the bloody MPs themselves. It's like they've created and they control their own watchdog. I mean, it's a joke. That's not the watchdog. I don't care what the ethics commissioner says or any of these stupid rules. What matters is, what does the electorate think? What does Canada, what do the Canadian people think of this? And I think the Canadian people are disgusted by it, and that's why she's gone. I mean, she even says now, doesn't she? Oh, well, I was in touch with the ethics commissioner. It's like, so what? It doesn't make it ethically acceptable. You are ultimately a representative of the Canadian people, and that's what matters.
yeah, and we talked about Terry Newman's piece there yesterday. You know, like the $52 billion was spent on. I think you're way too far ahead. There, $52 billion that was spent on battery plants here in Canada, and what to show for it? $4 million per job, and most of those things are defunct now as well. So, and then she's the economic advisor. Look at the budgets that she tabled. Look at the mess that she left Canada in a decade, and then she's going to go to Ukraine and control all that money where there's been massive corruption that's been shown to be, I mean, that's been found in Ukraine. And she's going there in this place with Canadian tax dollars with no oversight, because they said that they couldn't disclose it to Canadians because we're a security risk, I guess, knowing where our money is being spent. But why Claypool putting this out and saying that there's maybe more to come from resignations, and he's listed a few of these, including Steve Guilbeault. Stephen, you know, we know that Stephen's upset, and as this pressure comes for more pipelines, Stephen Guilbeault must be pulling his hair out, what left of it, and he must
could cause trouble.
He must be losing his literal mind, because there is tremendous pressure now for pipelines. I mean, it's no longer just a few people screaming for a pipeline. It is the majority of Canadians and the majority of businesses. And now most people realize it is basically, that's Canada's lifeline. We need a pipeline. We did that, I think, 2 days ago, that Canada's pipeline is the lifeline. And here it is that you still have people that are adamant that there's no pipeline.
Even Quebec and BC, though, we should mention, like, even if the polls are to be believed, majorities in both those provinces also want this. So the likes of Stephen Guilbeault, I mean, he represents that kind of virulent strain of left-wing environmentalism that you find in Montreal, particularly. That's who he is. That's what he is. He's their avatar in many ways. And if even that province, the province that he sort of that is his foundation, if even that province wants a pipeline, wants natural resources to be developed, what can he do then? You know, it's like his world has collapsed, really, hasn't it? But I just wanted to point out a little bit ago when we talked about Chrystia Freeland, somebody I think in a very cheeky way, very arch fashion, has talked about the Russians capturing Chrystia Freeland when she goes off to Ukraine. I mean, I certainly hope not, but it does raise a question that I don't think anybody's asked, which is, you know, usually senior political figures, even when they leave public life, they have a certain amount of protection, don't they, from the state? I wonder, are we going to provide any protection to her? Because she is going to be vulnerable. And you have to imagine, if the Russians, like, this is wild speculation, but if the Russians, some operatives in Donetsk or something like that, if they did get hold of Chrystia Freeland, one would assume that she knows basically every state secret in Canada. She is one of the most senior political figures in Canadian life for the last 10 years. Like, you have to assume she knows just like everything, everything, what's in all the closets, all the secrets. Like that's a little bit of a concern. Like, she is, after all, an employee of a government that's at war, like a war for its very existence with a rather powerful country.
Well, one thing the Liberals are good at is keeping secrets. They've kept secrets from the Canadian public forever. They don't release any documents. So maybe the Russians would have a better chance of getting information. But here's another piece from Terry Newman there, saying, you know, like, this is Carney saying that we should stand with Ukraine, and then we're going to stand with China, who stands with Russia. But Terry's saying we should stand with Ukraine, but it's not clear we should stand with Zelensky due to his attempt to squash anti-corruption agencies investigating his friends, which he had to reverse. And what's with BlackRock and Brookfield reconstructing Ukraine? Again, this is this is the conflicts that are all over the place. Brookfield has huge, huge tentacles everywhere. And we're going to have Stephen Bonkin tomorrow. He's going to talk a little bit about Brookfield's tentacles. If Mark Carney, just a shred of fiscal responsibility, would divest of the options and shares of Brookfield while he's Prime Minister, because it just puts him in a bad light, even the perception of a bad light, because here he is in promising Canadian money, and Brookfield benefits from it. He gave $500 million to the European Space Agency, and Brookfield tied to that one. There's so many ties everywhere. He's going to China, where Brookfield borrowed money from China. That's a bad person to borrow money from. You know what I mean? Like, that's like borrowing money from Uncle.
Ask Africans.
Like, do you know what I mean? Hey, Uncle Louis, can I get some money? And Uncle Louis has some really bad terms for it. Like, why would you borrow money from the Chinese? That seems like a recipe for disaster, especially when you're using Canadian money to give it to China, like Canadian financing, and then all of a sudden you're borrowing money from China. That's weird. That's absolutely weird. And then the big thing that Mark Carney is going to push here, it's going to come here right away. It's this thing that's basically dead everywhere in the world now, except for Canada. And they just want to highlight this. This is Brookfield again, the ties in there. We are the world's largest private investor in energy transition. That's CCUS, right? So here's Brookfield. That's the largest investor in CCUS. And what's Mark Carney going to be pushing here in Canada? And options, if anybody doesn't understand how options work. So he doesn't really even pay for those options. So when he was working for Brookfield, he would have got options at X price. Say the stock was, I'm just going to use a number, $20. And his options are, say, a 10-year, 5-year option or whatever it is. Whatever the difference in that, the shares, he gets that when he cashes those options in. But he never paid a dime for those options either. So that's how options work. So Mark Carney is obviously his wealth will be tied to how much Brookfield can move its share price up. And if you're, like helping get contracts and different things, and to say it's in a blind trust when you obviously know what's in the blind trust, it's not very blind. And Scott Bessent said it best, the Treasury Secretary in the United States of America. There is no such thing as a blind trust. He had to sell all his shares when he took on that role.
And imagine if he still had his fingers in lots of pies, the American media would be on like a rash.
Just like going to town on him. They would be just like scathing. We'll get to it later, how they're even going after, and we'll get to it later, I'll tell you about. And here's another one, this is from Holly O'Donnell. Blacklock's 10 years and 0 charges. Canada Revenue Agency 10 years into an investigation of tax avoidance by wealthy clients of a Panamanian law firm that has not laid a single charge in the case. Cabinet a decade ago said the Panama Papers, what happened a decade ago? Involved thousands of Canadians deemed high risk. There's been 6 criminal investigations related to the 2016 release of the Panama Papers. 3 investigations were discontinued, no reason given, and 3 underway. As these 3 investigations still ongoing, no Canadians have been charged. Who else has this, not in Panama, but in Bahamas, $6.5 billion of tax evasion by Brookfield Asset Management. And still, the mainstream media, the government-funded media, have not asked Mark Carney why he hasn't closed that loophole. Obama called it the worst tax avoiders, the worst tax scam in the free world. He said that Bahamas bike shop. You know how many? I think it was 200 plus big companies have their office in that bike shop there in the Bahamas. That must be a crowded space, right?
I mean, it's just. Has there ever been more obvious corruption in, at least in the Western world? And that includes the Panama Papers and things like that. This is just pure corruption. There's no other way to look at it, really.
Listen to this one really closely. Jason Kenney put this out too, and also the world's moved on from climate schemes, right, and climate grift. But Canada, Mark Carney and the Liberals are going to still be pushing it here with CCUS and pathways and all that stuff. But let's listen to what they say here as this climate grift is over in the rest of the world.
The things you never hear about is total primary energy consumption in the United States is now over 72% comes from 2 energy sources, oil and natural gas. Record high market share, little in addition to volumes. Doesn't quite sound like the dying industry I've been hearing about for the last 15 years. But if you roll over to the electricity sector, it's a very different story. In the oil and gas production segment, declining capital intensity, increasing efficiency, surging production. What's happening in the electricity sector? Surging investments, gigantic amount of monies are flowing in. And what's been the net result of that? Almost no growth at all in the production of electricity, but significant growth in the price of electricity. If you make electricity more expensive and people don't know where that policy is going to go, guess what? Energy-intensive industry leaves your country. The United Kingdom and Germany are experts at that, and they can tell you. In Germany, they've invested $500 billion, more than doubled the capacity of their electricity grid, and they produce 20% less electricity than they did before the $500 billion investment, and they sell it at 3 times the price. Like, that is not a winning model. That is not what the world is going to duplicate. We have just gotten so far off track. Think of our industry, smart, detailed analyzing, physics, numbers, math. But when it comes to climate change, we just check rationality at the door. Forget it. That doesn't apply over here. It's only about decarbonizing and claiming we're in the middle of an energy transition. That's just, I think we are in the midst of the greatest malinvestment in human history. $10 trillion on a global base has been invested nominally in fighting climate change. What do you get for $10 trillion? Well, to be very specific on energy sources, we got solar up to 1.2% of global energy and wind at 1.4%. Collectively, 2.6% of global energy comes from these sources that $10 trillion of investments gone into, and everywhere the penetration level's high, prices have gone up, and you've, as I said, deindustrialized Germany, the United Kingdom, California. and you just move industry. That doesn't reduce emissions. If you make it so that the factory closes in the Midlands of England and it moves to Asia and it runs on coal now instead of natural gas and you load the goods on diesel ships, that's not fighting climate change. That's deindustrializing your nation and having a government pounding the drum on decarbonization, but never doing the math on is it working? A couple other data points. 85% of global energy came from hydrocarbons at the time of the Yom Kippur War. Woke the world up. Oh my God, oil prices tripled. They rose again later that decade. We got to change our energy system. That's when the energy transition movement started over 50 years ago. 85% from hydrocarbons. Today, 85% hydrocarbons. Let's just engage with reality. Oil, gas, and coal are what run the world. Full stop. We can't make a wind turbine or a solar panel or a nuclear power plant without massive amounts of oil, gas, and coal. That's how the world works.
It's surreal, isn't it, to hear that from somebody in a position of power? It's been a long time.
I mean, like I said, Canada's economy has been, Canada should be one of the richest nations in the world. I mean, we should be almost like Norway with a sovereign wealth fund that is just bubbling over with money, where we have healthcare that's crazy, roads. We don't even have a highway that is 4-lane all across Canada, not even our Trans-Canada. We should have all those things, high-speed trains between Edmonton and Calgary and wherever, the Montreal and Toronto and all that stuff. And that would all come from our resource sector. Well, we have 10 years, a decade of suppression. Mark Carney testified in committee, kiboshing the Northern Gateway Frontier project. Teck walked away from it after spending $1 billion and said that there's no path forward with this government. And we could go on and on and on and talk about all the projects that were suppressed by weak leadership over the past 10 years. And that weak leadership continues, and they're going to be pushing climate grift. Everything they talk about is energy sector. I mean, Alberta's kind of agreed to it, this MOU. And Mark Carney said it's tied to CCUS. It is tied to CCUS. So they're allowing private companies to come there and take fat off of it. And how do we compete with Venezuelan oil, American oil, and all those other oil companies that aren't doing the same thing? It just looks like Canada is weak, and that it even allows itself to be like basically, at being taken advantage of, so to enrich certain people. Brookfield has made massive investments, billions and billions of dollars into carbon capture, and they're going to looking to get it back. If it doesn't go in Canada, it's a big write-off for Brookfield, and you're going to see the stock price of Brookfield fall. So you think about that, and those options will become worthless. If that investment goes south, if nobody wants to take up CCUS, that's it for him. There's nobody else. Even if you go look at Carbon Capture USA, they stated on their website, there's no other place in the world that our technology works, because Canada is the only one offering 75 cents on the dollar. You have to ask yourself, what? Are the only place in the world?
And also, like I said this a million times, but the justification for it is climate change is gonna wreck the world. So that's why we have to capture carbon. I mean, people who actually are experts at this, do this for a living, have estimated how much money, how much time, and how much carbon would have to be captured for this to actually make a difference to global CO2 emissions. And it's, some people have said that it would be more difficult, require more work and more capital expenditure than building electricity grids, like starting back in the 1880s, 1890s, or whatever. Like, that's how hard it would be. It would just, the idea that Canada doing this on a couple of oil patches or something, a couple of oil developments, that's somehow going to have an effect on global CO2 emissions and therefore on the changing climate. I mean, what kind of person? This is an important question, I think. What kind of person do you have to be to believe that? The Chinese province of Guangdong, that's one province in China, puts out about the same or maybe even more carbon dioxide in a year than Canada. One province in China. What are we doing? What's the real what is actually happening here? Is it just stupidity, or is it something a little bit more sinister?
I think one of the bright lights is what Daniel Smith is doing is trying to attract companies and not having to ship that oil anywhere, and LNG as a utilizer for data centers, because data centers are super thirsty for energy. And if she can attract them there, then there'll be less you have to ship because you can just use the energy right there. And I think that, then I've said that for, you can go read my LinkedIn post from like 2 years ago where I said, Canada, I mean, Alberta could be the Saudi Arabia of the world with its diverse energy there. And it can attract, especially with the cold climate. If you go up northern Alberta, there's lots of flat land up there, and you could put massive data centers up there and just open the doors when you need to cool it, because they have to use massive cooling to keep these supercomputers cool. Just open the doors and let the environment cool it down, and use the energy to power these computers. But that is one of the bright spots, and she is starting to attract some of that stuff. So that is one of the bright spots. But here we go. Oh, Mark Miller. Listen, I mean, this virtue signaling, identity politics, that is the Trudeau Liberals. And this is one of the Laurentian elite here telling you what a horrible person you are. Let's listen in.
I want to thank Cassandra for getting us off in a good way and recognizing that we are on Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I also want to thank the Black Cultural Center for holding us here, for holding this event here today. And the work isn't done yet, but we've advanced 2 national anti-racism strategies to combat anti-Black racism. We're establishing a $200 million endowment fund to provide sustainable funding for Black-led, Black-focused, and Black-serving organizations. This is what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like. This is the power of a strong Canada, because when one community thrives, we as a country and as a people thrive. It's in this spirit that I'm proud to unveil the theme of this year's Black History Month, 30 years of Black History Month, honoring Black brilliance across generations, from nation builders to tomorrow's visionaries. That's why I'm proud today to announce an investment of $280,000 that'll serve for celebration across Atlantic Canada for the Black History Month.
Well, he also goes on to say that he's going to cough up another $200 million for DEI.
Yeah, this tweet is at least one order of a couple of orders of magnitude shy of the true figure there. But my question about Mark Miller is, why does he always sound like he's about to burst into tears? Him and Adrian Dix. Can you imagine those two having a conversation? It'd just be like, we're going to recognize Black brilliance.
Mark Miller, the Laurentian elite, when one of the reporters, independent reporters, asked him on the street, because you can't get an interview. You sent him an email. He just said no. He finally responded after badgering, and he said no. And then a reporter had to chase him down on the street because that's the only way he could get them. And he asked about immigration policy, because he was the immigration minister when immigration was just rampant and, like no access to healthcare, all those things. And he basically called the reporter a racist. That's Mark Miller, in a word.
And then he's proceeded to do this, talking about giving money to people based on their skin color, and surprise, surprise, has been called a racist by other people. So I guess it's up to you. Who's the racist?
When does Canada run out of money? Because I don't know what's going in the till, because they keep squeezing the taxpayer, but like they keep handing it out like there's no tomorrow. And I don't know. They keep taking it off your table. If you imagine you're sitting down to dinner and they come in and take half the food off your table, and your kids are saying like, we don't have enough to eat, and it's back like the King days, and you're begging, can you leave enough grain so we can replant the crops next year? Oh, here's the food professor, our friend, the food professor, showing the United States just flipped the food pyramid. I've been saying this forever. I lost I think 7 years ago now, I lost about 60 pounds, and I've kept it off by flipping the food pyramid. Just basically flipping the food pyramid and cutting back on sugar. I don't drink alcohol at all. cutting back on sugar, wheat, and grain at the bottom of the pyramid, by the way, and focusing on the other foods. And I've kept it off. And I still love chocolate. I mean, chocolate would be on the top of the food pyramid there for me. But look at that. And it's just, and they kind of lost their minds in the U.S. because RFK is the one that put this out there. And he flipped the food pyramid. And then the food professor saying, that's a better choice, right? Just eat real food. And then, you know what we're going to do? We got a little clip here for you. This is did I not put it in here? Yeah, it is. It's there. I put a clip in here just for Andrea here. This is for her on the food pyramid.
Today marks a decisive
No, not
change
that one.
in
No, one above that. No, not RFK. This one.
The pyramid doesn't work. We've already tried it.
It's upside down.
What?
Sir, the pyramid is upside down.
Turn the pyramid upside down. You can't be serious. That would put butter and fat at the top of the damn food pyramid! Get the president on the phone. Tell him to have some steak with his butter.
There you go. You can have some steak
was
with
that
your
AI?
butter. You can have some steak with your butter. Yeah, so eat whole foods. I mean, it's simple stuff. Stop eating processed foods. Stop consuming expensive sugary drinks and just eat whole foods. I mean, it's time to take responsibility for your own health, because you surely don't want to rely on the health system here in Canada, do you? Because you could die on the
I mean,
way
there's some
over.
good stuff though, isn't there, in that pyramid? Just looking there, you got salmon, eggs, olive oil, broccoli, all right at the top there.
Well,
I think possibly the most controversial thing is that bread is right at the bottom. People don't like bread these days, do they?
well, I mean, I lost, like I said, I tried tons of diets, and I did this diet that was basically no wheat, no sugar, or grains, no wheat, no sugar. And I was losing a pound a day. Like, it was unbelievable. No wheat, no sugar, which is basically 90% of the food that we eat, right? If you go into a restaurant,
Yeah.
you say no wheat, no sugar, they're just like, well, I'll bring you a steak or a hamburger, right?
Yeah, this piece of broccoli.
And I eat a ton of eggs, and I eat eggs like it's going out of style. I eat 6-7 eggs a day, and I put on muscle at my age, and pretty remarkable what you can do. And this is what I say about this show. You're going to learn some stuff, and if you just take care of your health. And I know so many people now that have reached out to me and said their health has been said. I just cut out wheat, sugar, and all that stuff. Eat like this food pyramid, and cut alcohol and anything else you smoke or toke or whatever. And you're going to find that I know some people that have changed their lives remarkably. Yeah, I used to be, 60, 70 pounds heavier, and basically I'd given up on thinking at my age there's no way I could change it. And lo and behold, you can do anything you want to do just by what you put inside your body. And plus, a lot of that stuff is expensive crap. Like, really, one of the things I avoided was shopping in the middle aisles of the grocery store. Just shop the perimeter. That's where all the good stuff is. All the stuff down the middle aisles, you don't want to eat that.
They always hide dairy, don't they? Right in the back corner.
Well, you got to go in the back corner to get dairy, right?
Yeah, cheeky of them.
But it's
But I
no
must say,
secret.
somebody's
Print this
slagging off
off.
bread in there.
Print this off, stick this on your fridge, and eat that. Eat that for 90 days and see what you feel like and see what you look like. You're going to be shocked.
Yeah, well, so I've got RFK and you and somebody in the comments telling me to stop eating bread. But I must say, I don't know how to do that even. I just
So my daughter
bread
does
is essential to me.
for my daughter does sourdough bread. She makes it with 2 ingredients: water and starter. That's it. I think she puts a little salt in it. That's it. That's all. Those are the 2 ingredients in the sourdough.
Yeah, well, the
Amazing.
stuff that you get, like the highly processed stuff, especially in America. I know there's some Americans in the chat here who will probably or might agree. The bread that you get in America, it's like just like the run-of-the-mill stuff. Horrible stuff. Like, and it's full of crap as well. It's got all sorts of
There's somebody saying they
weird
did the same
ingredients
thing.
in there.
They went down from 230 to 170 using Jim's diet. That's it. You know what I mean? Like, it's absolutely amazing. And there is ways to find things. Like, I get farm fresh eggs here, And $5 a dozen. And the eggs will come in different sizes. Some will be double yolk, some will be like a purplish hue. Some, I mean, and they got chicken poop on them. You don't wash them until you're ready to use them. But you can get stuff if you just look around, right? So farm fresh eggs here, $5, free range chickens, and a variety of chickens. And eggs is one of the best things ever, right? Like if you can get your family eating eggs all the time as protein, that is right there as, you know, good protein. It's usually fairly cheap, you know, unless you're buying it at the grocery store. But there you go.
What would our ancestors think from 5 or 10,000 years ago that we're abandoning bread? They toiled, they slaved so hard to do that, invent agriculture.
Anyway, you can do sourdough, but you just start making it. It just takes some time. There you go. Again, you're going to learn stuff on this show. Please like, share, subscribe, get it out to as many people as you can. Again, your voice matters. Look what happened with Chrystia Freeland. That is independent media, and you that did that by sparking outrage against the mainstream legacy media, the government corrupted media. They have crippled media in town. That's in Canada. That is the watchdog here. You can make a difference. You can make a difference, and you can make that difference by liking, sharing, subscribing, and supporting us. That would be helpful. Well, let's do a little bit of BC news. We don't got much here in BC news because we already talked about dicks and that, but then we got some good stuff in the international section. So stick around. We got some fun stuff too. Here we go with BC.
Coming to you live from the Now Media Newsroom.
David Eby. Well, let's listen to David first, and then we'll talk about it. Let's listen to what Mr. Eby has to say.
Potential amendments that might be introduced to the Declaration Act. What will be included, and when will they be introduced?
Thanks, Mark. We're doing that work currently. What I can say is that the amendments will make it clear that what we said in the legislature when that bill was introduced, when it was voted on, and all members of the legislature, regardless of party, supported it, remains true today, which is that the Declaration Act commitments were government-to-government commitments. They were work that we committed to do in partnership with First Nations governments, and it was not for the courts to take over that work. And so the amendments will make that clear. The other bright line that we're making clear for British Columbians is that private property of businesses and homeowners cannot be and should not be bargaining chips in reconciliation. This is work that the provincial government is to do with First Nations, and people's homes and businesses need to be secure. They need to have certainty in their title. So that's the work that's underway, and I look forward to being able to share that with you as quickly as possible. But we will be introducing those amendments in the upcoming legislative session. Follow-up?
Among BC First Nation, saying that introducing amendments to DRIPA could actually cause reconciliation work and negotiations that are already underway to grind to a halt. And he said that development being done in partnership with First Nations and BC could be slowed as a result of this. Also, 59 First Nations have now signed on to a letter opposing the introduction of amendments to DRIPA. How do you respond to all this?
Yeah, I mean, this is challenging work. And one of the things that was underlined in the discussion in the legislature when the bill was introduced was that there were going to be good days and there were going to be challenging days. We're in the challenging days. Unfortunately, in my opinion, we have had some court decisions that require us to make the intent of the legislature, of our government, clear, which is that this is work for our government to do with First Nations governments. This is not the work of the courts to do on behalf of government. This is too delicate, too tender, too important for that to happen. When we see court decisions, they bring huge uncertainty. They bring unpredictability, and they bring division. And so keeping matters out of court, staying focused on the negotiation work we've got to do with nations directly is the path forward. And I just fundamentally disagree that the courts should be directing this work. And that is the message I've delivered in private, I've delivered in public, to First Nations leaders across the province, and to all British Columbians. That is our government's commitment to protect private property, businesses, and individuals, and to do the work directly with nations, not through the courts, whenever we can.
We have time.
He's a lawyer. He understands. He's the one that did this. You know, he understands it. And he made the mess. He made this mess. And the easiest way to do it is to undo what you did, instead of like making, like the Liberals do, putting another piece in there. You know what I mean? Like, it's a dog's breakfast, and he's already got people pushing back on it. Like this thing is going to be tied up in the courts forever. And David Eby did this.
Yeah, I mean, he's a legislator, and he was Attorney General, wasn't he, at the time? Legislators write the laws, courts. You know, what we should start a list. We should maintain a list of the institutions and the individuals that David Eby has blamed for his own failures. We can now add the courts. That's one thing. The entire judicial system, the province of Ontario, the province of Alberta, the province of Quebec, the federal government, Donald Trump, obviously, in the Republican Party,
number one now, right? Donald
Russia.
Trump is number one.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm being facetious here, but
I'm amazing he didn't throw Trump into this. I'm
responsibility?
amazed he didn't say Trump was part of this interpretation of the law.
But it's just, as well, he's gone on about the courts. You know, it could well be Donald Trump the way he's talking there, though Donald Trump would never sound as boring as that. But where he's saying, like, you know, they create division and they don't look at it right. They don't look at it with enough what do you say, sensitivity or something like that. He's undermining Canadians' faith. Anybody that actually listens to him, undermining their faith in the judicial system. Is he not? I mean, not for the first time, to be fair. He's also, when it comes to crime and probation and things like that, parole, you know, bail, he's also undermined faith in the justice system. You know, it's very peculiar, isn't it? I mean, if you just listen to David Eby all the time, you would have no faith in anything, would you? You'd have no faith in anything in Canada or the world, except for maybe David Eby.
You'd have faith in the NDP for sure. That's it for BC News. So we have the international section and a little bit of fun at the end here, because we always got to have a little bit of fun, because this is, you know, the best undiscovered news commentary show on the internet by far, even if I have to say that myself, right? People say that. Anyway.
They're saying...
We're going to do this international section.
Coming to you live from the Now Media Newsroom.
Well, we've talked about this before. A tale of two nations, one economy. You said it earlier in the show. One, the star, the sun, and the other one's collapsing out of orbit. And here's a little bit from what's going on down south of the border here.
This is unreal, the movement in this number. Minus 29.4 billion. We cut it basically in half. We cut it in half. Just consider this. In March, it was 136 billion. Right now, it's a whisker under 30 billion. We haven't been that small in a long time. I don't have enough records here to go back that far, but you're going back a ways. And here's the news on why it moved lower. Buckle up. This is...
That's good. I mean, just a tale of two nations, right? And then Trump putting out there, again, that they're going to oversee Venezuela for a while here and there. He did a 2-hour interview. Again, here's the difference. Mark Carney won't do interviews, especially with independent media and media he doesn't like or whether it's not favorable to him, like he did. He granted crippled Global, and the state broadcaster CBC 2 half-hour interviews. Here's Trump. How many times has he talked poorly of the New York Times? Like
basically every day. Sued them.
And he sits down with them for a 2-hour interview. In a 2-hour interview with the New York Times. And then they go on every show that has been very unfavorable to the Trump administration. They go there every time and they do the interviews. Why not here in Canada? Why not? That is the threat to democracy, not being held accountable. He will go there and take it. Mark Carney, Stephen Fear, and the rest of these, Mark Miller, they will not be held accountable. They refuse to even adhere to the basics of a democracy, of being held accountable to answer questions to the public.
Mm-hmm. Which is what this whole system is based on. It's supposed to, you know, we used to talk about this a lot back in the day, didn't we? When we first started our humble beginnings. But it's kind of the basis of democracy. It's supposed to replace the old system, which was lots of groups of men who were armed, who had swords. And that was, you know, those were the checks and balances. It was delivered at the end of a sword or a spear or whatever. It's supposed to replace that, our democratic system. We're supposed to keep each other in check peacefully. And, you know, most people agree that's a better situation. But when you're not doing that, what happens? The system falls apart. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing, isn't it?
And then this is the energy secretary here in an interview with CNN, another outlet they don't like. But where do they go all the time? Again, this is intentional in Canada, the undermining of democracy. They will not be held accountable. And here, let's listen in on this clip here on CNN.
Well, think of the leverage the United States has. All of their revenue from oil, which is the dominant way they fund the government, is controlled by the United States. We're going to sell that crude, we're going to put it in accounts, and we're going to distribute that funds to the interim authorities in Venezuela and align that with incentives to improve their behavior, end the criminality, reduce the risk to America and the risk to their own citizens, and work with us to construct more confidence in that. But of course, with time, you're going to have a different government that's going to be representative of the Venezuelan people. But you can't do that on day 1 or on day 10. We want to keep the country from collapsing, and we want to immediately stop its enormous damage to the United States, exporting gangs, drugs, money, bringing our adversaries into the Western Hemisphere, giving them bases of operations. There's a lot of improvement we can do right away. And well, think of
that's good. They're going to sit that fleet on top of them there. And here's the way they're talking about the fleet. CNN goes at Rubio and Hegseth there on the cost of the fleet, and this is just a really good answer.
With them then, and but I'm not having anything further to add to that today.
Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers? Does the U.S. intend to buy Greenland?
Stop for a second. Stop for a second. Stop. Look at that, Ian. Like right there. You know, like, would you see that in Canada? Like the reporters are that close to shouting questions. They would never allow that in Canada, would they? Anyway, keep going.
Intend to buy Greenland. Can you clarify your comments to lawmakers this week?
Well, that's always been the president's intent from the very beginning. He said it very early on. I mean, this is not new. He talked about it in his first term, and he's not the first U.S. president that has examined or looked at how could we acquire Greenland. There's an interest there. But so I just reminded them of the fact that not only did Truman want to do it, but President Trump's been talking about this since his first term.
The White House put out a statement last night saying that the military option is on the table. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. They said that the military option is on the table. So is the administration really willing to risk the NATO alliance by potentially moving ahead with military operations?
What I think the White House said yesterday is what I will tell you now, and I've always said. The president always retained the option. Every president, not this president, every president always retains the option. I'm not talking about Greenland. I'm just talking about globally. If the president identifies a threat to the national security of the United States, every president retains the option to address it through military means. As a diplomat, which is what I am now, and what we work on, we always prefer to settle it in different ways. That included in Venezuela. We tried repeatedly to reach an outcome here that did not involve having to go in and grab an indicted drug trafficker. Those were unsuccessful, unfortunately.
The people of Venezuela are waking up to the same regime. Do you not worry about that?
Well, first of all, the bottom line is that there is a process now in place where we have tremendous control and leverage over what those interim authorities are doing and are able to do. But obviously this will be a process of transition. In the end, it will be up to the Venezuelan people to transform their country. We are prepared under the right conditions, using the leverage that we have, which includes the fact that they cannot move any oil unless we allow them to move it to... Well, again, I'm not going to give you a timeline on it. We wanted to move as soon as possible. But we didn't expect this would... It's been 3 days since this happened, 4 days since this happened. So I understand that in this cycle and society we now live in, everyone wants instant outcomes. They want it to happen overnight. It's not going to work that way. But we're already seeing progress. With this new deal that's been announced and more deals to follow, you're already seeing how the leverage the United States has over those interim authorities is going to begin to lead to positive outcomes.
How much does this cost American taxpayers? How long should the American public?
It doesn't cost us.
The U.S. involvement in Venezuela. How much will it cost?
Well, it isn't going to cost us any money. For example, this oil deal that's happening doesn't cost us any money. On the contrary, and if it opens up,
no money to
well,
look,
I don't have the numbers. What operation are you talking about? The entire thing?
Yeah.
Well, these troops are going to be deployed. None of these troops sit in a dry dock waiting for action. They're deployed somewhere in the world. If they're not here, they're somewhere else. Just today, our force is not deployed to the Caribbean.
Yeah, he's like the CNN reporter's trying to say like, oh, well, if, like it costs money to sit that aircraft carrier sitting there, well, it's going to sit somewhere, right? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not like the guys are like,
Well, it
all right, boys,
costs.
no work for you.
Then are they nuclear powered, the ones that they sent?
Yeah.
So I mean, what are the costs? Not like they're,
Well,
although there will be diesel destroyers
there's
following, but
6,000.
like, come
Yeah,
on.
there's 6,000 men on that. I think the amount of meals they put out in a day is 25,000 meals a day. So, but that ship's sitting somewhere, right? It's actually making money for them.
But yeah, wouldn't it be worse? The journalists would be more angry, surely, if America had spent all this money on military equipment and it just sat there and never did anything. It's
But the key point I want to make in this is look, would Carney and the Liberals or any government here hold up to the type of scrutiny that Marco Rubio, Hegseth, and these guys get, and Trump going on New York Times? Like look at the reporters there right around them. They got their phones jammed in their face and they just relentlessly. There's no way Mark Carney survives in this with the amount of conflict of interest, corruption, and Chrystia Freeland wouldn't have lasted 5 minutes without resigning. Right there on the spot, they would have torn her to shreds. The Canadian media has been crippled intentionally, and the Liberals get away with it because they know they can because of the biggest voice, because they won't answer emails. Stephen Fuhr, 7 emails unanswered. Mark Miller says no, right? That's it.
Mark Carney ignored as well.
Yeah, they cripple the media and they will not respond. And then they provide 30 minutes, right?
I would say as well, have to say it, feel obliged, even one of the people that I can think of in the Canadian political scene who could do that, Pierre Poilievre, even he ignores us.
Yeah.
Even he refuses to do interviews. So it's the culture, isn't it? It's the political culture. And it's that's the big leagues, isn't it?
But they do
like
some of this.
It's real consequences. And it's so consequential that Rubio and Trump and all the rest of them still feel that it's necessary to have this system in place where they're surrounded by this mob of opponents, basically, and ask questions. And they have to know what they're talking about. They have to give a sort of reasonable response.
But the Canadian media do show a little spark sometimes with Poilievre, like in the interviews. Global did. They just overtalk him and they shout out questions at him. They don't let him finish his points. They show a little bit of it, but there's nothing like this. Nothing like this.
Well, the closest that you'll ever see is in the press gallery when Poilievre stands there for a little bit, 15 minutes or something like that. He does get shouted at now and then, and it's a little bit sort of spicy and antagonistic. But yeah, I mean, it's very important to mention. We're talking about Pierre Poilievre in this context. It's very important to mention that Pierre Poilievre is not in power. He doesn't decide what happens in our lives. Marco Rubio decides what happens in the lives of Americans, and his equivalent is Anita Anand for us, and Mark Carney obviously is the equivalent of Donald Trump, and yet it never happens to those people, despite the fact that they have power.
Trump, they just withdrew the United States. We're going to go to the next one. From 66 foreign organizations, including 31 United Nations entities and 35 UN groups, that they give tons of cash to. They used to, and then say that we're withdrawing that because they operate contrary to U.S. national interests. Among the groups include I had the whole list there, but we're not going to go through the whole list. You can go find it on the internet. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the Framework Convention on Climate Change, imagine that. The Global Counterterrorism Forum, the International Renewable Energy Agency, the UN Entity for Gender Equality and Empowerment of Women, the Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. The U.S. said many of these organizations support radical climate policies, global governance, and ideological programs that conflict with U.S. sovereignty and economic strength. They really liked when Joe Biden was the president of the United States because they just had their run. The WEF basically had the military might. They had the military might because they could kind of wield it, and then without any like nothing. Now all of a sudden they don't, and that's why this whole climate agenda is falling apart. And if there was climate agenda that was about the climate, it's different. But it seems odd that all these people that are pushing climate agenda have enriched themselves through this climate agenda, and nothing has really helped. Like, look at how many billions of dollars Canada spent on this climate thing. Nothing has changed, yet billions and billions of Canadian tax dollars spent. And then earlier on, they talked about trillions of dollars worldwide spent and no change. But like the BlackRocks, the Vanguards, the Brookfields all seem to do extremely well in this. And Mark Carney sat on the Net Zero Alliance. He was the chair of the Net Zero Alliance, and he was on WF. He was one of the founders of the WF and was an author there. And his book Values talks about keeping 80% of Canadian resources in the ground. And he said just recently in an interview that was that a BBC reporter or a former BBC reporter?
Yeah, it was for Bloomberg, wasn't it?
Yeah, and said that he's still that same man of values, and everything in that book still holds true. So how is he building these pipelines at the same time holding those values true where 80% of those resources need to stay in the ground? There's conflicts everywhere. The whole thing is a conflict.
Doesn't make any sense, does it, at all? I'd just like to add about one of those groups left that the US is leaving, Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. I bet that has really upset Mark Miller in particular.
And then here's, they're following the strings back, and J.D. Vance is saying that, we're not going to play the clip though, J.D. Vance said that they've got the strings linking George Soros. I mean, that's another one. We just showed you the picture the other day, George Soros sitting there with Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau, both of those young leaders of the WEF as well. They were on the website, and Klaus Schwab, in his villainous way, said that he's infiltrated the Canadian cabinet. That was one of his.
Did he say penetrated? I feel like he said penetrated. Yeah, it's even more sinister.
That was one of his
big
wins.
Penetrated.
We have penetrated the Canadian cabinet with, I can't remember the number he had, but like, and yet the government-funded media here in Canada are just like, well, that's good, isn't that good? That must be awesome.
We're part of the world. Great. Klaus Schwab, though, I cannot believe. Did he not have any media people? Did he not have anyone around him to tell him, like, Klaus, you can't do the PR. You can't do this anymore. It's too weird.
And then we're going to skip that next one, but we'll go to the Democrats panicked after Trump confirms he's banning large institutional investors from buying up single-family homes. Huge for affordability. And I said this, I've been saying this for years. It's the corporate buyers that have been chasing up the prices in Canada and the United States. It's like, you ever watch that movie, It's a Wonderful Life? Pottersville, where the corporations own all the houses and you're just a renter. And you know who else? If you do a little search on the internet and you ask how many homes does Brookfield own? You're going to find some answers there. Brookfield, one of the biggest buyers of single-family homes. Brookfield. Remember, Mark Carney had that note that he sent out to shareholders and said, you know, when there's with all that immigration, that there's a tightening, like hard to find rentals, that we can squeeze the renters for additional services at this time. You know, like almost like Mr. Potter, just like, yes, we can get more money from them. I mean, at that time, I guess great, because he was looking after the interests of the shareholders. So squeeze the little guy as much as you can. Take every drop out, said Mr.
He kind of
Potter.
did say that, didn't he? That was one of his defenses. Like, well, I was representing the shareholders. Well, if I remember rightly, he kind of said, and a lot of those shareholders are Canadians. I seem to remember that. That's what he said.
Well, that's what the
which
CBC
is so
said.
Funny.
That's what the Liberal MP said in defense, and the CBC said, well, you know, a lot of Canadians benefit from that because CPP invests in that. Well, we need more Jim Baileys. We need more Jim Baileys. That's we'll be your Jim Baileys. How's that? We're gonna fight to the bitter end until they figure out a way to shut us down. But look at this. Right after this, guess what happened? And one of the Blackstone, which is owned by BlackRocks and Vanguards, as soon as that news was announced, they're one of the bigger buyers of single-family homes. Big sell-off in their stock, right? So, I mean, corporations shouldn't be buying single-family homes, right? Like, anyway. But you know what they did in Canada? They went after you for your Airbnb, David Eby and the government here. They went after you for your Airbnb, but not after the corporations, where the real problem lies. But let's listen. Tim Walz, like, holy cow, Tim Walz is probably going to end up with some striped shirts pretty soon, the way he's acting. Let's listen into what he says now.
Order to prepare the Minnesota National Guard. We have soldiers in training and prepared to be deployed if necessary. I remind you, a warning order is a heads up for folks. And these National Guard troops are our National Guard troops. They're teachers in your community, they're business owners, they're construction professionals. They are Minnesotans. Minnesota will not allow our community to be used as a prop in a national political fight. We will not take the bait. We will continue to update you, Minnesota, as we get more information. Now I'd like to turn it over to Commissioner.
So Tim Walz is basically mobilizing, if you read between the lines, mobilizing the National Guard to protect against ICE agents. So he's going to use the National Guard to fight federal agents? What is that called? Didn't they just
Yeah,
do
I mean, that was my initial reaction that this is, you know, suggestive of a kind of pre-civil conflict
Is
state,
it?
isn't it? And it's rather
Is,
scary.
is this Walz's January 6th moment? Is this what this is? What is Tim Walz doing? Like this guy, there's like a forest fire in his house right now. There's like a raging forest fire, and he's there screaming on the front lawn not to look there, look somewhere else because it's nothing to do with him.
But you get, you know, you get a firefighter to put the fire out. You get a politician to point at something else over the street while the fire burns. That's kind of what they do, isn't it? That's just, again, that's just their nature. He's got an opportunity now to talk about something else, to get people to look at something else, and he's seizing it.
He could be the poster boy for Canadian politics for the last 10 years. Virtue signaling identity politics. That's Tim Walz right there. Like, remember the Black Lives Matters movement, all that stuff, Tim Walz. Tim Walz, the rising star. Like, I mean, he was the rising star with Jill Biden went there talking about the daycare stuff. You know, like they all highlighted, turning out to be billions of dollars in fraud. And, you know, they're trying to play the race card and saying, how dare you look there? Because like billions of dollars, like there's some committee hearings I've watched. I'm just like, holy cow. Like this thing just reeks. And what Kamala Harris picked him as, and I'm not sure what she was thinking there, but.
We might, I mean, the Liberal Party might soon have to send in a couple of helicopters to rescue him, bring him to Canada.
Tim Walz, he could probably. Is he the Doug Ford light, or no? Doug Ford would never be like that.
I think he's probably more like David Eby, actually.
David Eby,
but a bit more panicky.
David Eby crossed with a little Doug Ford, I guess, right? It's more. Oh, well, that's our show anyway. That's our show. Anything else on the wire for today? I think I got a busy day, but let's see if I got.
We had the mayor of Minneapolis there, sounding like a hooligan in his performative politics. Didn't
Oh yeah, we
can.
can.
Too foul-mouthed for us.
Yeah, he's crazy. Let's just leave it alone.
Yeah, but that is quite. It's opportunism, obviously, from them. They don't believe a word they're saying. They never do they? Politicians, really. But it is opportunism, but it's also very dangerous language, isn't it? That when something's happened, when there's been, you know, there's been a death in Minneapolis, and then this is the reaction. It's so incendiary. It's very, very, very dangerous. And this from the people who usually are telling you how important democracy is and how important our institutions are and how we have to preserve them. Once again, you know, they're undermining the basic sort of principles of a liberal democracy.
Well, tomorrow, it's actually at 11. Stephen Bonk will be on the show, and we're going to talk. He did that video on Brookfield. He's tied some of the strings together, and he's a conservative MP from Saskatchewan there. And we're going to keep reaching out, get more interviews, more and more interviews. And we're going to reach out to the Liberals continually and to the NDP. And we're going to keep going. We're going to keep them on record. And we're going to keep pushing until there's freedom of the press here in Canada, because we would have a way better Canada and a way better government if they would allow themselves to be held accountable. But that's up to you too. Like you can make noise. It worked. Look at Chrystia Freeland. She would not have resigned if it wasn't for the uproar from the public. If it was not from the uproar from the public. X, if you're not on X, you need to get on X, because X is the #1 news platform in the world now. Do not let them take it away from us.
And Chrystia Freeland is one of the people that endorses what you just said, because that's where she put out her statements, as you said earlier.
Yeah, and the same people like Kamala Harris said it's a threat too. Where did she put her concession speech right away? You couldn't find it on X. Yeah. X is where it is, and we did it yesterday. The government-funded media, the state broadcaster, they've cut off funding in the U.S. of PBS. Why? Because it was leaning towards the left, and it became a government propaganda machine for one party. No different here in Canada. Who could argue differently? And it's time to end the funding for the state broadcaster as well. They should be able to survive on their own. Go head-to-head with us. We got nicer ties.
Can we defeat the mighty Cochrane? I don't know. Rosie Barton? I don't know. Could we possibly defeat her?
We should do exactly what they do. Just anyway. We do thank you again. Like, share, subscribe. Get this out to as many people as possible. Like on the like you said, 85,000 in the last 2 days we had and views. So let's get that up there. Let's this is a real news outlet. We've been in business here for well over a decade doing this type of stuff. It's been quite a while, right? And Ian used to work for the Daily Mail and also for the UK government. So
for King Charles,
for the king himself. And from the king and the king's servant and myself, that's our show for today. I guess I'm the king's servant too. I'm at a lower level than you actually, because I'm just out here in one of the backwoods of the kingdom. Anyway,
in the territories.
Thank you for watching Now Media. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and Stephen Bonk at 11 tomorrow. So make sure you tune in for Now Media.